Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is George Ortega, and I'm here to talk about happiness, because happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all. Okay, tonight we're going to be doing our Ways of Becoming Happier number 7. And I want to start off with emotions, unpleasant emotions. On the previous show, I talked about them a bit, but it's a very important topic, and I really want to cover them as completely as possible. Okay, basically this guy, Paul Ekman, a psychologist, discovered that there are like 6 universal emotions, and the reason they're universal is because you could show a picture of someone expressing one of these emotions to anyone in the world, and they would know what that person was feeling. Okay, so the 6 emotions are fear, sadness, anger, disgust, surprise, and happiness. And pretty much happiness is the only one of them that is a purely pleasant emotion. Surprise can be both pleasant and unpleasant, and the others are generally unpleasant. I mean, we could enjoy fear, like going through an amusement park ride, but generally fear and anger and sadness and disgust are fairly unpleasant. And the reason they're so important to happiness is because whenever we're not feeling as happy as we could, it's one of those basic 4 emotions, and to a lesser extent surprise. It's either fear, sadness, anger, or disgust. So obviously the less we feel of these emotions, the happier we're going to feel. And as Dr. Diener, who's the leading authority on happiness, pointed out in one of his studies, it's generally what makes up for happiness generally isn't the intensity of happiness, but rather the frequency. So in other words, it's the frequency of feeling the emotion and the mood of happiness and of not feeling the unpleasant emotions that's going to make us as happy as possible. Okay, I want to go through a bit of, because what happens with these emotions is when we're infants, when we're babies, we need these emotions because we don't have language. We can't communicate our needs and wants other than resorting to these emotions. If we need to be fed or whatever, we're going to get angry or sad. And so generally they're very, very useful. They're indispensable when we're young. But what happens as we grow older, they become less of a necessary reaction to what's going on in our world and more of a learned reaction, more of like a habitual response. And a lot of times we learn these responses from our parents and other adults. As infants, as little kids, we'll see that something happens, a drink spills or something, and an adult gets angry, right? So we think to ourselves, all right, so they know better, so the response to something like that happening is anger, and so a lot of times we develop these habits of resorting to these unpleasant emotions as reactions to whatever happens. But what's important is that these emotions are not necessary for us to resort to when things happen. I've got to explain something related to this, though. Emotions in general, all emotions, the 6 universal ones and the many other kinds of emotions that form secondary and tertiary emotions, they're important because they communicate to us. Basically, our brains respond to what's going on around us more quickly through our emotions than through our intellect or logic. So what happens is, a lot of times something happens and the emotions are very, very instrumental in telling us something may be wrong, something may need to be addressed, especially the unpleasant emotions that are, designed toward that. And but see, the thing is that once once we receive the message, once let's say the emotion anger tells us that something is wrong, then that emotion has done its job. You know, there's no real reason for it to continue to be felt. You know, at that point, basically what happens is we evaluate what the emotion is telling us. Because, like, you know, sometimes these emotions are wrong. Like, for example, sometimes we see something and we react emotionally, and then we explore it a bit further and realize that no, that emotion isn't called for. It was like a mistaken perception. So I just wanted to mention that even though in general these negative emotions are not necessary to resort to continually, they are actually very useful to us as messengers, brief messengers that something needs to be addressed. Okay, let's see. So basically what I want to do now is I want to go through the 4 basic negative emotions and kind of explain what they're designed to do. For example, sadness, I would imagine, is the negative emotion that limits our happiness most. You know, sadness, I think, is a very major component in depression, which is pretty much, to a great extent, the opposite of happiness. Depression has some anxiety related and all, but with sadness, psychologists understand it as an emotion that kind of like it's in a response to something that we believe is irrevocably lost. You know, it could be like a friend moves away for good and we're afraid that we won't see them anymore. An opportunity passes us by that we think will be beneficial to us. So basically, that's the kind of response it is. And naturally, it's something that we believe we need. You know, sadness kind of alerts us to something we're in danger of losing or may have lost, but we think that we need it. Now, the thing with sadness, though, is that, again, these emotions generally don't evaluate situations. That's usually done by our cognitive processes, our logic. So a lot of times we resort to sadness about things that we'd be much better off not becoming sad about. And actually, you know, with all the negative emotions, let's, you know, taking sadness as an example, the only thing to really kind of like the sadness is really warranted about really is happiness, because like happiness is the purpose of the emotions, of our mind, of our lives, or, you know, it's our purpose. So that if let's say a friend of ours moves across country and we may not see them again, yeah, that's an unfortunate situation. And so it's like, you know, this person probably represents a source of pleasure and happiness to us, so we'll have to find our happiness and pleasure without that person. But, you know, resorting to sadness and then having that sadness be continual only makes the situation worse. Okay? So that's the same principle that applies to anger and disgust and fear. You know, that a lot of times in life there's a situation that brings these emotions on, but if we realize that what we're afraid of or what we're angry about isn't really necessary to our happiness, because 99 out of 100 times it isn't, then we can stay focused on happiness and you know, not allow these negative emotions to impinge. Okay, and the last thing I want to say about negative emotions is that they do form over time. The habit of resorting to them forms over time. You know, as children, we see adults responding to situations in those ways, or we respond to situations in those ways as infants, because, you know, that's the only way we know. And we end up concluding that is the way we respond. Then every time we respond to a situation with sadness or anger or fear or disgust, we will reinforce that habit. You know, so basically, the idea is to reverse that habit, to overcome that habit and replace it with a new one of basically reacting to whatever happens with a pleasant emotion, you know, with happiness, or at the very least not resorting to one of the unpleasant emotions to react to it. And that establishing of a new habit, that breaking of the old habit and re-establishing of a new one is going to take time. I mean, I would doubt very few of us, very few of us would be able to, I think, do this in a matter of weeks. It would probably take months. I would think several months, 6 months perhaps, maybe longer, because these habits are very ingrained. But the idea is, to the extent that we spend the time, devote the time to overcoming these, spend 6 months or a year overcoming these negative habits, we've got the rest of our lives not having to suffer the consequences of them. So it's pretty wise to invest that amount of time. Okay, before I go on to the next consideration, I want to do a song, and a song I wrote, and it's called "The Change." Okay. It's getting better and better, and you couldn't stop it if you tried. The world is coming around to a brand new paradise reality. It's getting deeper and deeper into what we're all about. The world is coming around to the kind of place you always thought that it was meant to be. It's getting clearer for all to see. Change is coming, change is coming, an undeniable destiny. The change is coming, and all around you will find that everyone is getting kinder and kinder, kinder and kinder in every way. It's getting closer and closer, and it won't be long before it's here. A world of perfect emotion that brings us all together in perfect harmony. It's getting truer and truer. Everything we knew was meant to be. We're coming close to the point of knowing how to feel the fantasy. It's bringing beauty from everywhere. A change is coming, change is coming. A love for everyone here to share. A change is coming, and all around you will find that we're all together for each other, forever. Okay. It's kind of a tough song to sing. It's like fast. I'm used to like singing much slower ones. A lot of chord changes and all. Alright, so let's see. Okay, one thing that we should do, one thing that psychologists have pretty much determined is that goals are a way of both achieving happiness and becoming happier. As a matter of fact, goals are held to be so important by some psychologists that they've formed theories of happiness that are based on goal setting and goal accomplishing. So now the thing with goals, though, is that I think we need to have sometimes courage and faith in setting goals. Sometimes life will reward our effort, our ambition, and if our ambition is to become happier, that's going to take some risks, and some of these risks are going to be related to setting goals. And so, the idea behind this consideration is that it's good to be courageous. It's good to be able to, not make things too easy for ourselves, to give ourselves a challenge, to give ourselves goals, the challenges. We don't want to go to the extreme of setting goals for us that are just so high that we can't accomplish them, because that'll have the reverse effect. That'll actually just discourage us, and that'll make it less easy to become happier. But if we pick goals, if we have faith and courage in our goal setting, and this is goals about our work, our relationships, whatever it is we're interested in, if we set goals that challenge us, that'll give us an incentive, and that'll give us a motivation to really work on them, to really, and also enjoy working on them. Okay. Let's see, the next consideration is we should really learn how to enjoy our leisure time more. The studies pretty much indicate that basically most people are more satisfied with their work lives than with their leisure time. And I remember reading a statistic that I think it's probably higher by now, but a while back the average person watched television about 25 hours a week, which is, around 3 hours a day or so. And that's a lot of time spent in a very passive activity that can be actually quite enjoyable. But as studies have demonstrated, when we watch TV for too long, it will tend to actually depress us. Perhaps it's the passivity. I haven't really researched the reasons why, but there is a danger. So TV is kind of like a pleasure that we need to use very wisely. And in general, we've got to, I did a show on weekends a while back. We have to really value and treasure our leisure time. There was a time when people didn't, hardly had any leisure. A couple hundred years ago, the Industrial Revolution, 100 years ago, people worked, 7 days a week, 12, 16 hours a day. And so we've got leisure time in the evenings and the weekends, and it's wise to use this time wisely and to think about it and to plan it, because leisure time is kind of like our training ground for happiness. We will get better at becoming happier and feeling happier and being happier if we devote a lot of this time to that effort. Like we spend a lot of hours working at our jobs. Sometimes we're inherently interested in our jobs. Our jobs provide a lot of pleasure just because we really like what we're doing. Other times we need to work for other reasons. But with leisure, we've got the opportunity to pretty much use leisure for however we want. And so it's just very important to really try to use leisure in a way that's going to promote happiness, and to just be conscious of the opportunity that leisure provides. Okay, the next thing that we should be doing is, well, this is very related to this, we shouldn't be working any more than we have to. A lot of times some of us work more than perhaps is good for us. Well, for two reasons. Sometimes, like the most popular reason that many people think will make them happier is by having more money. A lot of people think, well, if I just had more money, I'd be a lot happier. And well, unfortunately, the research demonstrates that no, having more money might make you a little happier, but in general, it's definitely not worth the effort, because you could be as happy or happier in ways that are much easier, demand much less time and effort. And the other reason I think that some of us work more than I think we should is because we tend to enjoy it, or it's easy for us to enjoy work. Sometimes we're so into what we're doing that it's easy to enjoy. It becomes very natural. But our minds and bodies need rest. Need leisure, need times to relax. And while we can be very happy just working a lot, I think in the long run that would probably tend to become more and more difficult. For example, if that's our strategy for life, for becoming happier and being happy, as we get older and older, we're not going to have that energy. And if we don't devote time to learning how to not just enjoy our work life, but our leisure time, so that we can be happy, then by the time we get older and we don't have energy, we won't be prepared for the kind of special demands that retirement would require. Okay, so really we shouldn't work any more than we have to. Okay, the next consideration is the idea that the knowledge and education really have very little effect on our level of happiness. Now I've got to say this one with caution, because knowledge and education are extremely important to our happiness in general as a society and as a world. I mean, those of us who become very knowledgeable and very educated are able to help society and the world greatly. Food technology, energy, manufacturing, medicine, law. I mean, there are so many kinds of professions, so many kinds of jobs that demand, you know, technical skills and other kinds of skills that are very important. So, you know, I'm definitely not saying that knowledge and education aren't useful, because they are to our happiness in general. But the idea behind this consideration is that if one believes that by becoming, you know, more educated or more knowledgeable, one will become happier, you know, it's just been demonstrated that that's not the case. I think this was actually known back in biblical times. I think it was Solomon, and one of those kings has it as a proverb that wisdom just, I think it's in Ecclesiastes, that wisdom just has its limits, you know. But the thing is, like, if we are gonna, like, a good thing to become very knowledgeable and educated about is happiness. I mean, you know, considering that it is why we're here, and like that everything else that we do is implicitly designed to help us either preserve our happiness or increase it. I think it's good. It's very wise to cultivate an appreciation for knowledge about happiness and educate ourselves as much as possible to it, because you know, in terms of our personal well-beings, no kind of knowledge or education is going to serve us as well. You know, sometimes, you know, this knowledge will have to do with also goodness, because goodness, I think, is very important to that also. But yeah, while knowledge and education per se will not you know, affect our level of happiness, as some people might believe it may, knowledge and education about happiness definitely will. Okay. We should have a sense of humor. Sense of humor is like, it's very, very useful, because like what happens, and this goes back to what I was talking about the negative emotions. There are so many things in life that don't go according to how we expect them to go, you know, and this is actually kind of like a definition for what humor is. Humor generally involves a reaction to what's unexpected. You know, either somebody says something that's unexpected, or there's a concept that's unexpected, or something happens that's unexpected, and it might have some other dimensions to it, but generally it's a reaction to what's unexpected. And see, like, what happens is, without humor, we will often tend to resort to the negative emotions, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, and all. But see, humor is so amazing, because it'll, you know, somebody spills something, you know, and like, yeah, it's easy, and it might appear logical to become angry or frustrated or whatever, you know, but those of us who have developed an appreciation of humor and know how to use it will, rather than resorting to those negative emotions, find the humor in it. And this relates to anything. I mean, I think humor is probably best used when it's used for toward ourselves. I mean, sometimes if we make fun of our friends and, you know, family and all, they may not think it's funny, and a lot of times it's not, you know. But generally, if we're poking fun at ourselves, at our failings, our misgivings, our limitations, that can really help us. That can help us a lot also, because self-esteem is very important to happiness. It's one of the 4 personality traits that's most correlated with happiness. And so that when we're able to accept ourselves using humor as a tool, you know, just humor allows us to accept whatever failings we might have. You know, some things, of course, we shouldn't laugh off, because some things, let's say we've got certain deficiencies in certain areas that are maybe affecting our work life or relationships, then yeah, it's important to be responsible and work on them. But at the same time, it's just good to understand that as human beings we have these limitations, and to the extent that we use humor to minimize the negativity of them, and to actually just turn them into positive, enjoyable events. I mean, that's an amazingly powerful tool for being happy and becoming happier. Okay, the next consideration is that we should overcome shyness and our fear of other people. You know, other people are our main source of happiness. Our significant other is our main source, and then it's our friends and family and all. And so happiness to a great extent is about other people. And when you think about it, you know, to be shy, to be afraid of other people is to greatly limit one's opportunities for being happy and feeling happy and increasing one's happiness. You know, there are some of us who either naturally or through effort have developed a way of being very comfortable with others. I think salespeople are very good at this, just establishing a kind of rapport that's very friendly and enjoyable. And you know, to the extent we do this, again, you know, if we can overcome this fear of people that sometimes develops, you know, we can be so much happier because we'll be spending so much more time with people. For example, instead of like, you know, being at home in the evening, watching TV, watching other people on the TV set enjoy themselves in some restaurant or something, or a coffee shop or a movie, you know, we could call a friend, a family member, and invite them, and, you know, spend real time instead of having our enjoyment be vicarious. Okay, and one last thing related to this is we should get into the habit of like using the telephone for this. I mean, the telephone is an amazing tool. I mean, you call up somebody, you know, in 20 minutes, half hour, you can have plans to do something. Okay, well, that's all we have time for tonight. Thanks for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life. This is George Ortega saying, be good, think well, feel very happy, and I hope you'll join me again next week here on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful, it's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny, so let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.